Welcome to our CLC and CIC event today, which is going to look at embedding digital technology into our projects, obviously piggybacking the great work that's coming out from the government around the construction playbook. Certainly, I must say that I've been on a number of calls in the last couple of weeks, and I was speaking at a conference this morning, and I do see a great deal of movement happening in industry around digital technologies, and of course the raft of aspects that the construction playbook is trying to deal with, including better outcomes for clients, a shift to modern methods of construction, and also the need for us to get to a net zero solutions with all of our projects. So lots of different things coming to the fore. So welcome to this afternoon's event. I'm sure you know who all the speakers are coming up, but I'll introduce them one by one. Now, in terms of housekeeping, just a couple of things to mention. We are going to record this event, so I hope that's okay with everyone. This will allow us to record or put the event onto the CLC website, so anyone that can't see it today or be with us in the present moment can watch this in the future. The other thing is there is a Q&A text box, so please post any questions that you have as the speakers speak, and then we have a Q&A at the end of the event. And I must say that, you know, last year at the end of 2020, the CIC board endorsed a pivot for the CIC BIM forum, shifting it into the CIC digital forum, and we've been working quite closely with Anne Kemp, who's one of the speakers today, to look at how we can better coordinate across industry. So I think this is a fantastic event today to allow us to coordinate our activity around digital across industry. So I'm absolutely delighted that we've got a really good set of speakers today. And obviously one of the emphasis coming out of today is so that you understand where all that coordination is happening, so that you can, of course, engage with the different initiatives that are taking place. So I think, you know, that's probably enough for me for an introduction. And just to kick off the speakers today, I'd just like to welcome Fergus Harradence from BES. He's a Deputy Construction Director, and I'll let Fergus introduce himself. So good afternoon, Fergus, and thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Del. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Fergus Harradence, Deputy Director for Construction in BES. And what I'm going to cover today in the next 15 minutes is to give you a quick overview of some of the content of the construction playbook and how this fits within the wider framework of something called Project Speed, aimed at delivering infrastructure better and faster. And then I'm going to focus in on some of the specific elements of the construction playbook, which are perhaps less high profile than BIM or working towards the use of digital twin technologies, but they're nevertheless quite important for the productivity of the industry. So next slide, please. So what is Project Speed, which really is the context of the construction playbook? Well, it was launched in summer last year. It's chaired by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and it has the key aim of improving the end-to-end delivery of infrastructure and construction projects, from work to determine what it is you actually want and project inception, right the way through to the handover of a completed built asset and ongoing efficient asset management. And that's and the construction playbook is really the bit in the middle, the bit from the point at which you've decided to construct an asset, and it's all the way through the procurement process, but we'll come on to that a little bit later. So the aim of Project Speed is to deliver better quality, greener projects more quickly. We estimate that we can reduce delivery times by about a third, which is similar to the CLC estimate that was made in the Construction 2025 strategy in 2013. But doing this requires effort across a number of different areas. Firstly, legislative change, and the government has foreshadowed some of this in the Green Paper that it published in January, looking at reforming the public procurement rules to accelerate those. It needs strong drive from government, and in particular, it needs government to coordinate activity across all of the departments and other organisations that are responsible for commissioning and procuring. construction and infrastructure projects. And then finally, it requires government to work in a more coordinated and collaborative way with industry. And that's one of the other reasons that we chose to publish the Construction Playbook. Next slide, please. So what are the objectives of the Construction Playbook? Firstly, to reset the relationship between government as client and the construction sector to make this more strategic and focused on shared objectives around improving project delivery and creating a more sustainable, resilient sector in the UK, and less transactional. So moving away from project by project contracting, which naturally leads people to focus on what the capital cost of the individual project is, rather than what the longer term value of a certain investment can be, or how capital cost could be reduced over the life of a programme. One of its objectives is also to increase the speed of end-to-end project and programme delivery, and that's where it fits within the context of Project Speed. Worth stressing this point yet again, it is about embedding the delivery of best value at the heart of government procurement of construction, not lowest cost, driving innovation in the adoption of modern methods of construction, and that includes much greater use of digital technologies all the way along the supply chain. And it also looks to the future, where we intend to start trying to procure built assets based on product platforms of standardized designs and interoperable components and interfaces that will enable us to build lots of different types of building from the same component parts. And finally, it's also aiming to create longer term, more sustainable, effective and fairer contracting arrangements for all firms in the supply chain. And the outcomes that we hope to achieve from this will be a more productive, efficient, innovative and profitable industry, which delivers better outcomes for its clients more consistently, improved building and workplace safety, and also a sector that can fully support some of government's big strategic objectives, whether it's the transition to net zero carbon, the delivery of other environmental objectives like biodiversity, or increasing the level of social value it delivers. So, for example, investment in skills. Next slide, please. The Construction Playbook applies to all public works projects and programmes that are funded by government, including building, civil engineering, construction or equipment projects. It is mandatory for central government departments and arm's length bodies to operationalise and use the approach set out in the Construction Playbook as of the point of publication, which was December 2020. So from now on, all new projects and programmes that we bring to market will be expected to work in a way, or be delivered in a way that's consistent with the playbook. However, we do understand that there are some projects and programmes where they're at a more advanced stage of delivery or procurement, and because it is very difficult to change things in the middle of a project, we recognise that in those cases, the aim has to be the pragmatic application of the provisions of the playbook to the greatest extent possible, but without completely overturning the project structure in order to do that. And then finally, it's worth noting that government is working closely with the CLC on a plan for supporting the implementation of the provisions of the playbook in the private sector. And we've been hosting a number of webinars and other events in order to raise awareness about this. And we're also looking at what other forms of support might be useful to the industry. Next slide, please. So in terms of the content of the playbook, it's based around 14 policy reforms. The ones in the lighter shade of green are ones that some people might recognise from a document we published a couple of years ago called the Playbook. And in some ways, these are really the, what Maslow would have called the hygiene factors about how you should procure products and services effectively. So the publication of commercial pipelines, undertaking market health and capability assessments of suppliers, early supply chain engagement, selecting the most appropriate delivery model for a project or programme, considering how you allocate risk appropriately within the supply chain, and what pricing and contractual mechanisms would be effective. But what is different in the Construction Playbook are the 4 lines or policy measures that are highlighted in the darker green on this. And the first of these, portfolios and longer term contracting, really is the way in which we aim to realise the point I made earlier about moving away from a transactional relationship. So, for example, rather than offering somebody a contract to build 10 schools over 2 years, we tender a contract for them to build 50 schools over 10 years, but with the expectation that the final 20 schools will be delivered to higher quality standards more quickly and more cheaply than the first 10 schools, while the supply chain learns, beds in and learns how to do this in the most effective way. Chapter 3, and this happens to be the chapter that I was responsible for authoring, is about the harmonisation, digitisation and rationalisation of demand. And that is promoting the use of digital technologies. It includes the UK BIM framework. It points towards the National Digital Twin, and also technologies that you would embed in the supply chain to better manage operations there. And through the use of these technologies, enable government to use modern methods of construction as the default mode of delivery for our capital construction and infrastructure projects. Point number 6 is about outcome-based approach. So avoiding trying to over-specify the detail of how people should do things in contracts and focusing on what we actually want in terms of building performance or this wider social and environmental value. And then finally, number 7, embedding digital technology, which I think I've really covered. So I'll skip over that and move on to the next slide. And then the final slide, just to focus on some of the, perhaps the less high profile, but nevertheless fundamentally important elements of the construction playbook and what we want to achieve through greater use of digital technologies and adoption of these within the supply chain. Firstly, we're asking firms to look at things like payment systems. Prompt payment has long been a problem within the construction industry. There are often long delays. This causes enormous cash flow pressures, and it also increases tensions within the supply chain. So one of the ways in which we would like to alleviate some of those issues and problems is by shift to digital payment and contracting systems, which aim to streamline, simplify and accelerate payments to firms in the supply chain and remove this as a source of tension and dispute, and also to give government as client and also government which has a clear policy on prompt payment, greater oversight of what's actually going on down the supply chain, rather than having to rely on information that comes direct from the prime contractor. And we see this as very much a key part of building more of a trust-based collaborative relationship within the industry, as well as strengthening supply chains. The second area is around supply chain management. As we've seen in sectors like retail and logistics over the last 30 years, there's tremendous scope to use digital technologies to improve information flows, promote collaboration and coordination, improve productivity, support contract management, and this is where we look to the future with the possible implementation of things like distributed ledger technology in supply chains, and also reduce the risks of poor communication causing defects which then require remediation and which then increase costs. Third area that we are encouraging firms to look at is quality management. Rigid and rigorous approaches to quality management and applying these to all aspects of their operations has helped to transform productivity and quality in the manufacturing sectors. As we look to industrialise the construction industry, we want to do exactly the same thing, just to an accelerated timescale, learning from the experience of manufacturing, bringing that learning and knowledge over to the construction industry and embedding that in our approach to delivering projects and programs. So we want to use digital technologies to help us track progress, monitor whether work's been completed, the quality of the work that's been done, the materials used, the contractors who've been involved, in order to enable us to not only better manage construction jobs and give greater confidence to clients and other investors in the ability of the industry to deliver, but most importantly, in relation to those buildings that are going to be within scope of the new building safety legislation and regulations, helping us to deliver the golden thread of building safety information, which will enable us to ensure that these buildings are safe for people to live and work in. And then finally, the area of cybersecurity. This is an area where the construction industry overall is vulnerable, and it has, over the last 12 months, been targeted more and more by malign actors looking to access systems or find data about employees and use these for nefarious purposes. we would like to ensure that as we encourage the industry to digitise, we don't do this in such a way that it leaves an awful lot of back doors open to those actors getting into the supply chain and accessing sensitive data, whether it's about projects or infrastructure or whether it's about people. So we want to ensure that we weave across our approach to encouraging digitisation greater consciousness of and capability in relation to cyber security, and ensure that this is an industry that's capable of keeping its data, its systems and its people safe. So that's the end of the presentation. But what I would like to conclude with is just one final comment on the importance of some of the things that I have mentioned, which, whilst they're not as high profile and maybe not at the forefront of people in the industry's minds in the way that, say, BIM is or National Digital Twins are, because they are intrinsically less exciting, these are nevertheless important. And we should remember that in the 1990s, in the United States, Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for Economics for identifying that about a third of all US productivity improvement in that period of time had been delivered by one firm, Walmart, through its digitization of its supply chain, because Walmart was so large and its supply base was so pervasive across the whole of the US that by forcing companies to wanted to supply it to digitize and to build their capability to do this, it actually had an impact at the national level on the productivity performance of the largest economy in the world. And there is ultimately the potential for construction, a sector which accounts for about 10% of economic activity, to have a similar positive impact in the UK, but only if we follow the same approach, which is driving the adoption of digital technologies right the way through the supply chain. And I'll stop there, and I think I've just come in about a minute before my allotted time, which is a better performance than usual.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fergus. That was some fantastic insights there in the construction playbook, so thank you very much. In terms of our next speaker, it's obviously been, it's hard to believe it was 8 years ago that the UK government began its BIM journey, but of course in the last 2 or 3 years, Anne Kemp has been responsible for steering the BIM from basically being a UK standard into international standards. And certainly I know I do go into some international meetings myself, and I think it is great to be in a meeting where people all over the world are talking about our BIM standards. So I think that's been fantastic. And of course, as all of that work is solidified, the UK BIM Alliance, along with BSI, has been helping to now provide that solid UK BIM framework for the future. So I'll hand over to Anne, who will take us through what the UK BIM Alliance is doing in order to get us on the next piece of the journey, I guess, Anne, of the UK BIM framework. So thank you.
Thank you, Dale. So yes, I'm Anne Kemp. I'm employed by Atkins, but I'm very fortunate to have the support of being able to focus on really helping industry moving forward with digital transformation, and particularly around information management. So the UK BIM framework is actually supported by the 3 organisations of British Standards Institution, the Centre of Digital Built Britain, and the UK BIM Alliance. I chair the UK BIM Alliance, and as Dale has just alluded, I've been convener of the ISO, the international standards on which the UK BIM framework is now based. And that's actually taken, rather than the 2 or 3 years, it's probably closer to 10 years that we've been on that journey. But let's, with the next slide, consider the key questions here. What on earth is BIM? And what are the real demands behind it? BIM is, despite what Fergus might say, is maligned. We have a long, long way to go before this can be seen anything like as being business as usual. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And if we go on to the next slide, what I'd like to say is that let's bring this down to basics. We're not expecting the whole industry to understand the details and technical niceties of standards. It has to be made practical and pragmatic. It has to be supporting the aims and objectives of the construction playbook. So what we're talking about is better information management. At its simplest, it is a process. What we want to get to is being able to identify, be able to create, and then deliver data and documents which can be used for the whole life of the built environment assets. So it really is making the right information available to the right person at the right time to get that right action. So if we move on to the next slide, what I really want to impress on you is that I really hope that I and anybody else who has now got a reputation around BIM, we do not get up in the morning thinking, oh, fantastic, I'm going to talk about BIM today. What we're actually wanting is to start with outcomes. What does the built environment need to actually be delivering better outcomes for society, for the environment, for the world at large, and ultimately for the way that we move, live and work through our society. So it is part of a much, much bigger picture. And I know that Mark and Kevin will be picking up on this as well. So there should be benefits from a client perspective, from the owner of the building, for the people who are operating the highway or the railway. And there are clearly benefits from a designer and a construction perspective, but that's not where it stops. The much bigger outcomes and paybacks is during the whole life. And that's really what we need to impress. So this needs to be relevant for facilities managers. It needs to be relevant to asset managers. But ultimately, it needs to be relevant to us as citizens. And I think a real leveler and a grounder for me is that if the plumber and the electrician who's working on your home or on that high-rise building, or indeed on the infrastructure, is not able to actually give information which will assist that whole life operation and maintenance of that bit of infrastructure or building, we failed. They should not need to understand the standards. They don't need to know that it's ISO 19650. They don't need to know about BIM level 2. What they do need to have at their fingertips is an ability to be able to use information and feed relevant information into the system. You can go on to the next slide, please. What we need to overcome are some of these attitudes that our construction industry has such a reputation for. BIM, virtual coordination, it's far too hard. We'll just play around with the real thing. We'll mock up whilst we're actually in the mud or in the structure. And of course, what we're trying to do is to avoid that, but not just in the design and construction. What we want to avoid in the next slide is what tragically happened at Grenville. We need to be much smarter at understanding what the original design was for a building, and why we mustn't break those initial rules. Why that information needs to carry right the way through the life of the building, and to also be available to the people that it will impact. So whether it be the homeowner, the flat owner, whether it be the building owner, they need to know how to actually maintain or refurbish that building in a safe way. So there is a lot of work to be done. And I'm sure that many of you on the call will be more than aware of the Grenville report and the golden thread of building information, which is now being much talked about. So if we go on to the next slide, there's quite a few of us who are really busy now working with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, with BEIS, with the Health and Safety Executive, to work out what the essential information is that needs to come together to inform the building safety case. But as I've already said, this is just a part of the much wider ecosystem that we're looking at across the whole of the built environment. So as you can see in the next slide, there's also this call for integration right the way across the built environment, so that each asset can be linked up, but in a safe way, in an appropriate way. So we need to be thinking about security, not just from a cyber, but from a personnel perspective as well, and from a physical perspective. And we also need to make it relevant for each person who's actually working or living within that environment. So ultimately, down to us as citizens and members of society. And without wanting to steal the thunder for Mark, who will be coming on in a moment, if we go on to the next slide, what we're really after now is to be able to identify what is the relevant information for how we are going to put all of this together. So we don't want the railway to be working in isolation from Environment Agency, for instance, or from the energy sector, because if there is a flood, which actually impacts on the power supply, we want to be able to then respond and to avoid that sort of event reoccurring again, or indeed for the emergency services to be mobilised. So what does that actually mean? What can we do about that? It is about now thinking about the information and the decisions that need to be made. So next slide, what we need to go back to and remember moving forward again is, what's the question? What's the decision that needs to be made? What's the worry that you have? Is it about safety of a building from a fire perspective? Is it about the flooding risk for a critical asset, such as a railway or a road? And what is the data? What's the information which will inform that? How can we deliver that and absolutely make it useful for those right people and those right actions? And this is where, again, what I'd like to emphasize is we need to ensure that information is available. So if the builder, if the plumber, if the designer can't think in 3D or in a more sophisticated technology, we really need to be thinking about how we could deliver that information in a way that it facilitates the way that they think, so that they are able and equipped to make that decision appropriately, and with the wider team. So next slide. Part of what we did with 19650 was to try to simplify the language of the standard to start with. So, you know, your information requirements, yes, let's state what we actually want before we begin. And we start to plan and deliver how that's going to occur. So the information delivery planning. That needs to be collaborative. It needs to be communicated very clearly to whoever you're putting responsible for designing or maintaining an asset, for changing that asset. We also need to know how it's going to be delivered so that it can be used, and clearly it needs to be approved so that we've got quality information that is being cycled through. So again, if we move forward to the next slide, how we've really developed this with standardization has been occurring over what, 20 or so years. So if you look at the timeline on this next slide here, we really are standing on the shoulders of giants. This has been going on for a long time. Back in 2010, 2011, there are a number of key reports which were really indicating that the construction industry as a whole had got problems. And a part of it, and as Fergus has already said, it is just a part of it, is the way that we manage information. There was a huge opportunity to be able to improve on that. And so what happened from at that point was that there was the development of what became known as BIM Level 2. Over those years, those 5 or so years, a lot of lessons were learned. And during that time, we then, as the UK, proposed to the international standards body that it was raised internationally. And that's where I then became a convener to work that through. So what I'd really like to emphasise is, as I say, what we've got now, the UK BIM framework, is building on what has come before. All of those lessons have been built on, but also improving the language and making it clear and anticipating where we're shifting to as well, which Mark and Kevin will be covering shortly. You'll see on this slide also that we had the formation of the UK BIM Alliance, which was where, with the move and the shift from BIM Level 2 to the Centre of Digital Built Britain, industry was asked to start taking a step forward in taking ownership of the leadership of that. If we move on to the next slide, one of the things that I hope you see with the UK BIM framework coming from the international standards is that we have been very clear in that we're taking on the perspectives of society at large as well as the asset owner. So we really are scaling this up, and we're making sure that it is around whole life. And it's put in its place, if you like, is that information management needs to be within the context of asset and project management and of the overall organisation. And when I'm talking about organisation, that can be at the level of a local authority, it can be at the level of UK government. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide. So I've already hinted at that we are moving away from BIM level 2. So with the next slide, you'll see we had this suite of documents, the 1192 suite of documents. And actually, in large part, they are now withdrawn because we have got replacements with the ISO 19650 series. There are two more, one around information exchange and the other around health and safety, which are actually in train now at an international level. So what we've got with the ISO 19650 series in the next slide is this suite of documents, which now captures the concepts of whole life management of built environment, but starting with outcomes. What is the point? What are we really trying to achieve? We're covering delivery and operational phase, and we've also got that security-minded approach in that too. Moving on. What this gives us, as well as being able to really stabilise what we're doing within the UK, it also then really raises our profile internationally. So looking at the next slide, you can see, particularly from a Centre of Digital Built Britain perspective, the international team has been able to move from the EU BIM task group to really getting the message of what has been essentially a UK global leadership position in South America and in Asia. And this has really helped both from the perspective of developing the international standards, but clearly for us with being able to export our expertise in this area. Next slide, please. So, there are global social and economic benefits, but there's also the local, private and public capability and capacity, just as we're seeing within the UK. But then it is this demand for the UK BIM expertise, which we are seeing across the construction industry now. Next slide, please. So let's go into a little bit more detail about what the UK BIM framework actually is comprised of. It is the overarching approach to implementing BIM, better information management in the UK. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see the links to the website for the UK BIM framework. And what I'd really like to urge is that this is very much a collaborative effort. And if you would like to contribute to the development of the UK BIM framework guidance, for instance, you will be welcomed with open arms. But clearly what we're really wanting to do here is to make it accessible to the whole of industry. So SMEs, as in small, medium enterprises, as well as the trades and the whole life maintenance and operations side of things. Next slide, please. As I said at the start, there are the three organisations of British Standards Institution, CDBB, and the UK BIM Alliance supporting the framework. So we're continuing to work to develop this wrapper, both of the standards themselves, but also that guidance. So as the Alliance, for instance, we've got the communities, we've got the affiliates of the professional institutions and trade associations, we've got the technology group, so the vendors, the technology vendors, and we're working all together to ensure that there's essentially a single set of guidance. So really communicating in a clear and concise manner how to actually implement the framework without there being loads of different versions and ways of describing it. So next slide, if I can then show you what that actually is comprising. You've clearly got the standards themselves. You've got the remaining 1192 and associated standards. But the real work that has been going on in the background has been development of comprehensive guidance, the protocol, which has been developed out of the old CIC protocol, but is now the UK BIM framework protocol supported by CIC, and then the tools. If we go on to the next slide, we can show you how that has been developed. So this has been collaborative. It is absolutely open for people to be involved. So as we can see going on now, we've got an authoring group, which probably now has involved, say, 20, 25 people currently at the moment. But in the background, we've probably got 75 odd people who are looking and reviewing and challenging the content of guidance. So as some of you will know, that I keep an eye on social media. If people are having problems, there's debates, then we will approach and invite those people to come with their opinions. We'll listen to those opinions and we'll take that on board and incorporate that in the guidance. So what does that guidance now look like? In this next slide, you'll see the structure. So there is comprehensive guidance for each of the standards, but also then we've developed themes. When you go into the website, and please do, it's free to be downloaded, there is a lot of information to support you on your journey. But what we want to do now is to make it more accessible, so to develop tools ultimately so that the plumber and the electrician can have an app, and they don't need to know anything about what the standards are, but it's there easy for them to implement. So I'm really pleased with the next slide to be able to point to that the UK BIM Alliance is there to help you on your fundamental first step if you're starting on this on a digital transformation journey. As Fergus says, this is only one element of that, and I know that Kevin and Mark will develop that further. But this is the alliances for the industry, by the industry, showing leadership, mobilizing the whole of the community and enabling practical implementation. There is a heck of a lot more still to do. We're certainly not complacent. We want to help. If you would like to come in and be a part of that help, you are really, really welcome. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm also close to finishing. As I say, the ISO 9650 UK guidance framework is there, it's live. Please do use it and let us know how you get on. It's there to really make the UK BIM framework, which is being mandated as part of the construction playbook, become alive for the whole of the industry and for society's benefit. So if we move on to the final slide, I believe, do visit the website where you'll get the material. But if you want help or if you want to help, do get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's great to have a reminder of all the work that's been gone into all of those standards. You're absolutely right. There's some significant initiatives over the years. Absolutely fantastic. So for our next speaker, we go to the next end of the digital journey. I mean, certainly I've been working with clients recently looking at digital twin technologies to play into some of our projects, and I think it's really, really exciting to see how digital twins aligned to IoT technologies will really start to power up massive productivity benefits in the use of buildings. You know, the productivity that Fergus was alluding to earlier on. So I'm absolutely delighted that our next speaker, Mark Enzer, is going to talk to us about digital twins and what the CDDB is doing to get us to roll these out at a national level. So I'll not steal your thunder anymore, Mark, so over to you.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Could I just ask for the screen sharing to be enabled for me, please? Brilliant, thank you very much. So hopefully you're seeing this. And Dale, could I ask maybe, yeah, do you mind keeping your picture up so I can see a human face? I've done loads of these talks now, and I find just speaking into my screen without seeing a human, it gets disheartening after a while. So you will definitely pass as a human to speak to.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Definitely not a robot. Yeah.
Definitely not a robot.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I mean, it's really great to be here and have the opportunity to share a little bit about digital twins. And I think totally appropriate that I follow on from Anne. You'll probably see some slides that I've stolen from her as well. So what I'd like to do, just to kick us off, is point out where in the construction playbook we can see about digital twins and the National Digital Twin. And you can see that it's really clear under one of the kind of key policy areas, this whole idea of further embedding digital technologies, and there at the heart of it, this adoption of the information management framework and the creation of the National Digital Twin. So what I'd like to do is introduce digital twins, introduce the National Digital Twin, and explain what that information management framework is all about. But just before I do that, I want to show how, just as Anne said, that what we're doing here is building on what went before. That's precisely the same with digital twins and connected digital twins. And so we might have this vision for a digital built Britain based around the words of design, build, operate, and integrate. But what you'll notice instantly is that those are exactly the same words that are in the UK BIM framework. We're talking about the same vision here. This is not a different thing, it's a continuation of a thing. And I think what makes the connection so strong is the whole thing about information management. Really, that's what it comes down to, is recognizing how very important our information is, understanding its value, managing it properly through life cycles. And so this is just picking up on that exact same theme, but as you'll see, it takes it onto another couple of levels. So what on earth is a digital twin? Now, I'm sure there'll be many people listening who know exactly what digital twins are, so forgive me, but I'm going to start with some kind of entry level talking about digital twins, and then we'll build it up from there. So I guess we're all familiar with the physical. That's what we see and touch, and we know it very well. And I guess if we've got examples like Formula One racing, it's fun, we can watch it, it's good. But some would know that there's also a digital twin that's going on at the very same time as the cars are speeding around the track. And that digital twin is a realistic representation of the physical thing. But what makes it a twin, and this is really important, what makes it a digital twin is the connection between the model and the thing it's modeling. There's data going one way that informs the model, and then the model helps to generate insight. The insight enables better decisions, and then those decisions drive interventions back in the physical world. And in the physical world, you hope for better outcomes. And what that means is that during a Formula One race, they know exactly what's going on in the car. They can kind of fast forward it to see what happens next, understand when it is best to bring the car in to change wheels, to change tires, I mean. But also they can be analysing the overall performance of the car and understand if there are design changes that are needed before the next week or the next 2 weeks. And then other things which they can do with their digital twins is put the digital twin in a digital wind tunnel and test it for all sorts of other conditions. So if you're going from a low altitude racetrack to a high altitude racetrack, what kind of changes do you need to make to the aerodynamics, etc. So that makes sense in the context of Formula One racing. And maybe it's not a surprise that those who have the best digital twins win in Formula One. But it's exactly the same picture if we want to make this generic for all digital twins. There's some kind of connection between the digital twin and the physical twin. Data flows one way and some kind of intervention goes the other way. It doesn't have to be real-time data. It all depends on the purpose of the twin. And you can have digital twins of assets or processes or systems. So we can already see there's many different types of digital twins for many different purposes. And then also when it comes to what constitutes the twin? You know, what's the key part of it? There's clearly the data that's coming in, and that has to be of high quality, otherwise you can't do anything with it. You can't generate the insights. But generally there's some kind of model, there's something, some kind of code that is doing something clever with that data to generate the insight, to drive the decisions. And then very often there's also visualization, which allows the humans to see in at the twin, to see what's going on and understand it. So we can see all of those components being really important in digital twins. And then every twin really needs to be driven by purpose. Now we're pretty clever as people, we can make all sorts of digital twins, but we shouldn't do it without purpose. Otherwise, it's that space where, you know, technology without a purpose is just a toy. So this really needs to be driven by purpose. And once we know what the purpose is of the digital twin, then all sorts of other things fall into place. You kind of start to know what data do you need, what kind of model do you need, what refresh rate do you need, etc. And so we see digital twins, it's really important that it's driven by purpose. Okay, so that's digital twins in general. But what happens when we apply it to the built environment? Because that's really what we're talking here. And I think that if we look across the whole of the built environment, we see many different processes where digital twins can be applied and can make sense in making better decisions, driving better outcomes. That could be in the use of the built infrastructure. So what we have is better use decisions, but also digital twins to help with the operation and maintenance of assets and systems. And then you can imagine digital twins also in planning and design and construction and commissioning. So pretty much throughout the whole of these processes around the built environment, we can see applications for digital twins. So now we're imagining many possible digital twins for many different purposes. And that then leads into the idea of really making use of the thinking of the fourth industrial revolution in our built environment. It's seeing it not just as a physical system, but also as the digital one. We can start to think about cyber physical systems in the built environment. So don't get scared away by this terminology. It is the terminology of the fourth industrial revolution. It's not new to humanity. It might be new to the built environment, but this is very familiar territory in advanced manufacturing, for example, seeing cyber physical systems. And really what it's about is bringing digital and physical together. And where we have digital and physical together, then we can generate more value. So that's kind of taking it up to quite a high level. But where does this all go? If we start to try and make it into something kind of more graspable for us in the built environment, turn it into something real. Well, I think that comes through the National Digital Twin Programme. So 3 years ago, the National Infrastructure Commission came up with this report. I'd commend it to you. It's a really good report. It's a really good read. But what it recommended was that as a nation, we should move towards having a national digital twin. Now, that's not seen as one massive digital twin of everything, but it's seen as an ecosystem of connected digital twins. And I'll describe that in a bit more detail in a moment. So it recommended that. It also recommended that we should put in place this information management framework. Now, the idea of that is to enable the national digital twin. And again, I'll come back and describe that in a bit. And the third recommendation was to form this digital framework task group. Now, the Digital Framework Task Group brings together people from across government and industry and academia, the whole idea of which is to help create alignment across the industry so that we can pull in the same direction, because this has to be a collaborative exercise. Effectively, we have to collaborate on the rules so that we can then compete on the game and set up a market, hopefully a really exciting, vibrant market. But that market will be enabled by having some shared rules, and those shared rules are the Information Management Framework. The role of CDBB in this, that's the Centre for Digital Built Britain, it's a partnership between BEIS and the University of Cambridge, is really quite tightly defined. It's our job to deliver that information management framework and to enable the National Digital Twin. It's not our job to build the National Digital Twin, I'm glad to say. That's for everybody else. That's for the market to do. But it needs to be enabled, and it's a key job of CDBB to collaboratively work across the industry to help enable that vision. But really, it's others who will build it, others who will build individual digital twins, others who will connect them up. All sorts of benefits to society, the economy, to business, to environment. But I think all of these benefits really come from one central thing, which is that if we can make better decisions faster, that will drive better outcomes. Okay, so let me explain briefly what we mean by an ecosystem of connected digital twins. I've kind of introduced this idea of the information value chain already, because I think effectively a digital twin is just the embodiment of this, but this shows it in a slightly different way. What it shows is data coming in from the environment from lots of different places. It could be from sensors, it could be from existing data, it could be from satellite data, video data, the Twitter fire hose, doesn't matter, it's data. But you need to do something with the data to make it available for use. You need to make the data fit for purpose, fit for use. But once we've done that, we've still just got data. We need to do something with it to make sense of it. And that sense making generates insights. The insights are of greater value than the data on which they were based. And then it's on those insights we can make better decisions. And the better decisions lead to better interventions. The better interventions lead to better outcomes. And so what we have here is a direct connection between data and outcomes. But the thing in the middle that makes a difference, that unlocks the value, is making better decisions. So that's the information value chain. We've seen it wrapped around a digital twin before. And so now I've just put a train in the middle of the definition. Same thing though, data going one way, insights, decisions, interventions back the other way. So this should be that if you've got a digital twin of a train, the train should never break down. You know, we should be running a train. So when that door starts to make a nasty noise, the sensor, the acoustics picks it up, understands what's going to happen next. The door's going to break down, but instead of it breaking down, we take it in to mend. And so that means that I won't be sat at Stevenage with everyone having to get off the train because the door broke. So you can see that for helping to make better operational decisions or maintenance decisions for individual assets. But what we can then see is that if we've got a digital twin for the train, wouldn't we also have digital twin for the track on using the same basis, and digital twin for the signalling? So the answer is yes, because we can see a purpose for that, making better decisions. But if we've got digital twins of each of those, doesn't it make sense then to share some data between them to make a connection between the digital twins? So this is a really key point, that if we're going to connect digital twins, the way we do it is with data. It's a data connection that connects digital twins. We can zoom out a bit and make the same argument across the transport sector. So making connection between road and rail and air so that we can make better within sector decisions, more integrated transport that is genuinely integrated because we're making integrated decisions. Again, the same thing, it's shared data that enables it. We can zoom out again and see the same argument at a sector basis, where it clearly makes sense to be sharing data between sectors. Don't run sectors as silos. And this becomes even more important as we consider systemic challenges like net zero, resilience challenges, moving towards circular economy. If we're going to solve those systemic challenges, we really need systems-based solutions, which means we can't just work in silos. We need to break the silos. The best way of breaking the silos is through sharing information across the silo boundary. And so here we see cross-sector information sharing enabling better decisions. And those decisions could, for example, be around how we manage electric vehicle fleets. Because if you've got fleets and swarms of electric vehicles, is that transport or is it energy? The answer is it's really both. We need to share the information across. So what we've described now is an ecosystem of connected digital twins, each one created for a purpose and each connection done for a purpose. So we're not talking about a kind of a top-down Stalinist approach. What we're talking about is growing this ecosystem one purpose at a time. But in order to minimize the friction of data sharing, we need to have common rules. Because if you can imagine all those data connections, if each one is done in a bespoke way, everyone thinks it's a great idea to connect the twins, they connect it up in their own way. What you effectively have is a network nightmare. So what we need to do to minimize the friction in that ecosystem of connected twins is have some simple rules to help us share data in the most effective and efficient way. But what you'll notice is that this is still all about information management. It's the same story that Anne was telling before. And so what we have put out there as the suggestion for how we reduce the friction in this data sharing network is that we need to have a consistent approach to data modeling. We also need to have shared reference data. And we need to have a shared integration architecture. What we mean by that is common rules and protocols so that the right people get access to the right data. This is where security really hits it. You don't want the wrong people getting access to the wrong data. So we need those three things. And what we're really trying to do in the National Digital Twin Programme is identify the minimum that we need to share to unlock the maximum market. We're not trying to kind of come up with all the possible rules. We just don't have the team to do that. So what we're doing is trying to work collaboratively across government, industry, academia, is to come up with that minimum rule set that then unlocks the maximum market. And I think that this really speaks to the role of government in this, in preventing an anticipated market failure. The market failure I've already described, which is the kind of the network nightmare of everybody doing everything in their own way. That would make it much harder to get the benefits from this ecosystem of connected twins. And that's why we need this information management framework. And so hopefully now you see why it's written in as a central part of the construction playbook. For those who are interested, it's also there in the National Infrastructure Strategy. It's also there in the National Data Strategy. So I'm glad to say that it really is being recognised that this is a fantastically important thing for us to be doing. We think that it needs to be driven by values. And so one of the first things we did on the National Digital Twin Programme was come up with the Gemini Principles. Now, the Gemini Principles set out the values, the principles that we think should guide us on this journey, because technology by itself, could go well, could go badly. But if it's being guided by shared values, then it's much more likely to end up in a good place. And so we've highlighted these values under three key headings: purpose, trust, and function. I'd be really happy to come back and talk about these in the Q&A, but we'll just scoot on for now. So just to end with, I'd like to talk briefly about what it is we're doing to deliver all of this, because I'm hoping that you've heard what I've said and you think, oh, that's a good idea, we should do that. So how do we do it? And one of the key things which we think is important in this is to bring the community together, the community of those who own digital twins, who want digital twins, the ones who are going to buy and specify and procure digital twins, as well as those who sell products and services into the digital twin market. Because after all, what I said was we're trying to create a vibrant, connected digital twin market here. So we established the Digital Twin Hub to do that. It's already a really vibrant community. We've got, I think it's about 1,500 members now. It keeps on going up, and 750 separate organizations. And what that Digital Twin Hub does effectively is concentrate the market, so it's all in one place, rather than everybody off doing their own thing. It's where we can bring the lessons together and share the lessons and move forward quicker. So concentrating the market is a really good thing. The other really good thing is to be developing that information management framework. Now, this takes some pretty heavy duty technical work, but that technical work needs to be checked with the market, with the real people who are going to use it. So it needs to be done not in isolation, but in connection. So it's not only tested by the market, but informed by it. So that's the development of the information management framework. And then the third key component is what we've called the socio-technical change program. Now, we've called it that, which is a bit of a mouthful, I know, but the reason is to recognize that this isn't just a technical solution. There's definitely technical aspects, but if it doesn't get adopted, then it's useless. And so we recognize that the adoption of all of this is at least as big a challenge as the development of it. So we kind of see the overall program as both the development and the adoption of the information management framework. And the socio-technical change program is really looking at change at a number of different levels. It's what we have to do as individuals to change, it's to do with training, what we have to do as organizations to change and move up a maturity journey. And that maturity journey is really a maturity in information management. And then what we have to do in sectors where there are connections between organizations, and what we have to do at a national level. And so it seems it kind of stands to reason that kind of change program needs to be thought through and managed rather than just kind of left to randomness. And therefore we have a socio-technical change program that has been proposed. And those three key components are all interconnected, as I'm sure you can imagine is necessary, because one informs the other. And then just as Anne was allowed to do a little plug at the end for people to join things, I'm going to do the same cheeky thing and say that if you're interested, do join up at the Digital Twin Hub. It's got loads of really interesting people in there. So if you're serious in digital twins or interested in digital twins, do join up and be active. Don't just kind of sit there waiting for other people to do stuff. Join in, because if you've got good use cases or good case studies, then share them, because everyone's really interested in that just now. So that's it. That's going to wrap up with that. Thanks very much, Dale.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. That was great. And I don't think the plug's wrong at all. That's the whole point of the event, is to help disseminate information on this and make sure that people are going to the right sources, Mark. So yeah, that was great. So our final speaker today is Kevin Reeves, who is representing the CLC digital stream. I think the great part of this initiative is obviously it's playing into the main CLC group, but I think the unenviable challenge that Kevin has is trying to pull together and trying to coordinate a really disparate bunch of or a group of people who are doing wonderful things. But of course, the whole point of the group is to make sure everything's coordinated and collaboration kind of runs across it. So anyway, Kevin, I'll not steal your thunder again, and I'll let you tell us all about the work of the CLC digital group. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dale, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Dale, for the opportunity to speak today. So this presentation will run you through kind of an overview of the digital network within the Construction Leadership Council, and just give you a flavour of the type of activity that we're underway with to date, but also a view as to where we're going in the future. You will see, as I suppose will be no surprise, some familiarity and some slides that both Mark and Anne have shared, but it really just shows that all of this is very well aligned. So in terms of the work stream objectives, we tried to keep this very simple and uncomplicated, and really there are two key objectives to the work underway. We want to facilitate and accelerate digital transformation in the UK's built environment, and there are two key reasons, I suppose, for wanting to do that. As stated in the construction playbook, we want to improve performance. We want to increase productivity within our sector, but also really importantly, think about the export potential. We have close ties with the Department for International Trade. There's amazing digital capability in the UK. Let's shine a lens on that and unlock that export potential. The other key objective for us is really to connect and coordinate the digital activities and initiatives across all of the work streams. We're not here to dictate to people, we're here to support, connect and coordinate so that we can accelerate overall. So what do we mean by digital transformation? Now again, this isn't a definition that we want to impose on people. It really is there as an aid memoir to kickstart the right discussions and get people thinking about what digital transformation means to them. But we have created this definition, which is actually in part pinched from CDBB, but it really does lean, as Mark and Anne have said, towards using information to make better decisions, to improve processes and to apply technology more wisely. Well, having said that, then who's it for? Well, it's for all organisations. I think this is really important. If we look at, for example, the music industry, nobody tends to buy CDs anymore. We stream music. Mark gave the F1 example earlier on. If we think about Rolls-Royce and their powered by the hour model that is fundamentally underpinned by digital transformation, it's those organisations that can really drive that change that will be the ones that survive and thrive as we move forward into the future. Another important thing is that it's for all delivery processes. There's been amazing work across the sector moving towards digital delivery and really thinking about new levels of automation. We've got artificial intelligence coming at us. What can these technologies do to really help us drive productivity improvements across the built environment? And the last point is really, this is about built environment systems. Mark was talking about kind of an ecosystem of connected digital twins and taking that systems view. A railway is made up of many different systems. And when you shine that, in particular on a kind of a city perspective, we'll create as a result smart places for society at large. And that's ultimately, why we want to drive that change. I've pinched this picture from CDBB. I wanted to show this because I think it just shines a light really on the great work that's underway. Within this picture, there's a myriad of different digital initiatives that are already driving value across the built environment. We're not starting from scratch. There's loads of great work out there. And this diagram, I suppose, is very much a linear picture. It shows those different stages of design, build, operate, and integrate. But also we need to think about that same picture, but from a circular perspective. So using Anne's diagram that shows it in a more circular fashion, how does that fit in the context of a circular economy? We need to embed more sustainable practices within our sector. Fergus rightly mentioned at the start that construction is a significant contributor to the UK economy, but it's also a significant contributor to carbon emissions. So we really do need to think about more sustainable practices as we go forward, thinking about how we leverage digital technologies as an enabler towards that. So this just sort of gives a flavour really for the new structure of the CLC. It's a bit of a busy slide, I'm afraid, but it really does articulate how the digital network sits within that revised CLC structure. And what's interesting is about this time last year, Mark, myself and a couple of others were given the opportunity to present to the CLC board, because originally digital wasn't represented as a dedicated work stream. But we noted in the recovery plans that digital was mentioned, over 18 times. And, we felt it was necessary to raise the importance of digital, given its hold across industry and its ability to help us transform. And thankfully, Fergus and Andy Mitchell and the CLC board agreed, and we formed the digital network as a result. Now, I guess what's important to note is, we felt it's important to represent it as a network, simply because digital impacts, almost every aspect of our lives these days. And it's kind of fundamental really to every work stream and working group within the CLC. So again, luckily everyone agreed, and we formed this as a genuine network across the CLC. So what you can see in the kind of just underneath the structure diagram is the digital leads network. Now across each work stream, we have digital leads who are kind of, taking the lead in their particular area. Dale's taking the lead for us with building safety, but there are amazing leads in each one of those work streams driving the agenda forwards. Now Mark and Anne are the overall work stream leads and responsible for the overall coordination and the drive, and myself as delivery lead helping to drive it forwards. Now what's also important is we have an advisory group. Now these are kind of experts from across industry, although interestingly they're not all digital experts. We wanted a good diverse group of challenging thinkers to give us a hard time every now and then. So the digital advisory group meets once a quarter, and they are there to effectively provide some constructive challenge. We replay to the advisory group the progress to date, and they're able to give us some guidance and some support and provide that constructive challenge. So what's the overall approach within the digital network? Well, there's really kind of three key things that we're focused on in terms of the overall approach. As I said before, it's our aim to be supportive, not directive. But importantly, it really is about leadership and strategy. So we've identified the digital leads, and we're working with them now to develop appropriate digital transformation strategies. Now, that word appropriate, Mark used it earlier on, but it really is important. You know, we don't want technology or digital transformation just for the sake of it. You know, we need to make sure that it has purpose and it's appropriate to our sector. Baselining and benchmarking, you know, this is really important. We're working really closely with the digital leads to kind of understand that starting point, but also help us be clear on the progress. So we, you know, once we've defined that starting point, we can work together to understand what the end vision is, and then think about the steps to get from A to B. And as I said before, connecting and sharing really is fundamental to what we're doing. In part, it's about identifying good practice, but then making sure that we share that across the work streams and the wider industry. And I think that's what's so important about the CLC work, because there are many different trade organisations involved. You know, we have a very, very diverse ecosystem that sits within the wider CLC. So we can get access to a very broad range of stakeholders, you know, test ideas and concepts with those stakeholders, you know, take that feedback and evolve the strategies as we go forward. So there are several kind of initial activities that we've been working on over the last 12 months, and I'm really pleased to say that the progress with these activities has been unbelievable. You know, we've had amazing support from the digital leads and the work streams, and it's a tick in the box for these initial activities. But just to explain to you what they are, we identified the digital leads for both the verticals and the horizontals. We've established the starting points. So very much a view as to, well, where are we today? Using that then to start to think about some of the common challenges, and I'll explain those in a second. For those work streams that want one, we started to form some digital task forces. That's not relevant to every work stream, but for those where it's adding value, they've already started to create those task forces. And that really is bringing together leading experts within each work stream to really accelerate and drive that agenda forward. So from a core team perspective, we've been assisting both the digital leads, but also those task forces to start to identify the priorities and help them develop and articulate their own digital transformation strategies. Now, that priority work we've completed over the last couple of months, and that's been very, very insightful. You know, we've now got clear direction and areas of focus as we move through 2021, but also starting to think more widely across the next kind of 3, 5, 10 years. The support for those digital leads will continue as we go forwards. We do see this as an evolution. You know, technology moves at such a pace. You know, we need to be flexible and agile, and we need to be able to respond appropriately. The other thing that we're starting to encourage, and to be honest, it hasn't taken much encouragement, but is that capturing and sharing of emerging good practice via case studies, but also thinking about, you know, some of the good technologies out there that are really starting to drive value. So as we went through that process, as I mentioned just now, we started to identify key challenges that were kind of cropping up really almost in every discussion. As Mark and Anne have said, you know, the management of information really is important to people. Every single digital lead has some flavour of this within the priorities that they've identified, and it does genuinely sort of crop up in every discussion. Really importantly, making sure that, you know, the information is of good quality, but also available. You know, Anne picked up on the point earlier on. This has to be accessible to a very broad range of stakeholders across the built environment. Another key topic that always crops up in discussion is digital skills. There's been a good article in the BBC this week around this, but it's so vitally important. You know, we have a very diverse, often quite fragmented supply chain across construction and the built environment. So how can we really develop those digital skills and capabilities to unlock that value that we can see and drive those improvements in productivity? Now, we're very, very fortunate to have the backing of the CITB and various other skills bodies who are starting to develop a digital skills competency framework that we can take forward across the sector. That mention earlier on about this being for the whole supply chain, that's so incredibly important. We need to make sure that the needs and the requirements of a very diverse range of organisations is captured. We in particular need to think about how do we support micro businesses on this journey. If you look at repairs, maintenance and inspections as a working group, that's predominantly micro businesses. They have quite a challenge ahead of them. So what can we do to support those businesses who might not have the resource or the capital to drive that transformation themselves? And we're starting to get some very good engagement from the trade bodies who are able to support that work. So it's been very encouraging to see. I couldn't go through this process without a nod to health, safety and well-being. Anne picked up on the Grenfell situation earlier on, and it's so important. We really can use information to drive improvements in health and safety across the sector. And on the well-being front, well, where would we be today, given the situation over the last 12 months, without digital technology? The fact I'm able to present to you today, it's really quite staggering. We can carry on as an industry, even though a lot of us are working from home, but we can also use those digital approaches and technologies to help people who are, out on sites today, making sure that they're safe, making sure that their well-being is taken into consideration. Now, throughout the work we've done with the different work streams over the last couple of months, there are really 3 priorities that we are calling out as being common across all of those different priorities. There shouldn't be a surprise for this, I suppose, but benchmarking is a priority that almost every work stream has identified. This is very much thinking about, benchmarking, baselining, understanding where we are today in terms of digital maturity. This is leveraging some of the work that's been done by the Infrastructure Client Group. There's a very, very good digital skills maturity matrix that's been developed, and that team are working with the different working groups to tweak that to suit housing, to suit RMI, to suit local, social and commercial, so that we can start to build a picture of the overall digital maturity within the built environment. Now, that's not an overnight leap. That process is going to take time, but we have a proven method for doing that in infrastructure that we're then able to leverage and drive across the rest of the built environment. And I think that's a great example of the value that we're able to add as the CLC digital network. Information management, it's obviously been a very hot topic today, and rightly so. Anne's leading this as you would expect. And that really is about, supporting information management across the built environment very broadly. And as Anne pointed out, with a really keen focus on, how do you get, even the micro businesses involved in that process. So we're capturing that granular level of information that can really help us add value as we go forwards. One of the areas that I'll be focused on is looking at technology roadmaps. So kind of understanding, what types of technology are we using today? What value does that technology add? But importantly, what's coming at us, sort of looming on the horizon. If we think about quantum computing, that has the potential to drive some pretty significant changes. If we have, for example, a national digital twin, just imagine the simulations and the scenarios we'll be able to run to help us better understand our impact on the natural environment, as an example. Now, underpinning all of those are 2 core things that we see being weaved into everything that we do. One is informing skills. So as this competency and skills framework gets developed, we want to feed into that, leveraging the community that we have within the CLC. But equally, we would like to sort of raise the profile of it and help organisations put that to good use. Security mindedness was mentioned by both Anne and Mark, and I'll just reiterate the point again. It's not just about cyber. Security is a very broad field that also includes physical security as well. And as we build those cyber physical relationships, we need to be very, very mindful that we make those very secure and that we create resilient infrastructure for future generations. I wanted to touch actually on the work that Dale's been doing specifically and just call out the building safety priorities. Golden thread has been mentioned already, but really making the data flow. And that's so important, you know, understanding the resource that we have deployed across the built environment. You know, we consume a lot of resource, we build big buildings and infrastructure, you know, really understanding what raw materials are out there, what resources are in play within our economy is very, very important, both from a safety perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective as well. Thinking about next generation information, you know, what type of insights are we going to need as we move forward? I mean, Anne gave a great example looking at the information management framework in the context of Grenfell, and that's just one example. You know, there are countless ways in which we can use information to help us in our daily lives and continuously improve the safety of our buildings, of our infrastructure as we go forwards. And importantly, how are we going to use that to help us make better decisions as we go forwards, in particular in relation to building safety? You know, will that inform, you know, designs of schools and hospitals, as an example, when we come across an issue? And how timely can we do that? And how quickly can, for example, you know, emergency services respond? You know, when an emergency does occur? You know, all of these types of things we need to consider and build into the plans as we go forward. So I suppose that's kind of a view as to where we are now and the activities that we've been driving over the last 12 months. But I just wanted to kind of set a picture, really, a vision as to where we're headed. Now, we pitched this concept of creating a digital community of excellence for the UK to the CLC board last year. And yeah, there was a kind of, well, is it practical? You know, would this really be achievable at that sort of scale? It was a bit of a question mark at the time. However, the last 12 months have absolutely given us confidence that this is definitely achievable. You know, if you look what the UK BIM Alliance has managed to do, if you look what CWB have managed to do, you know, there are these amazing initiatives already in train across the UK, and we're already starting to see them come together to effectively form this digital community of excellence. And the fact that we've got that reach through the CLC, you know, through all the various trade bodies and organisations, means we have a tremendous opportunity to really gel the digital transformation of the built environment as we go forward. Importantly, thinking about the exports and trade that we'll be able to drive off the back of that. You know, as we start to identify best of breed, you know, the good technologies that are being deployed that are homegrown in the UK, that absolutely opens up opportunities for export and trade. And of course, as you would imagine, you know, over the next kind of few decades, you know, there'll be an enormous focus on net zero and driving sustainable approaches across the built environment as we go forward. So I would just encourage anyone, you know, please come and get involved. You know, you can reach out to come and take part in the community. You know, the more people we can get driving that transformation, heading in a consistent direction, you know, the quicker we'll start to achieve those outcomes that were mentioned earlier on. So I just wanted to kind of close really just by saying, you know, if you please do reach out. I'll put Dale in the spotlight on this one, but there's Dale's contact details. Dale heads, as I said, the building safety work stream from a digital perspective. We would welcome people support. You know, this is effectively a volunteer network who have already created significant value, and the more contributors we can get to the work that we're doing, you know, the more successful we'll be as we go forward. So, you know, huge thanks for Dale and the team for the opportunity to talk today. So thank you.
That was brilliant, Kevin. Thank you very much. And I think if you stop sharing your screen, I think, Kevin, we can get everyone back on camera. We do have some questions, but just as a reminder to everyone that's still listening in, most of you still seem to be hanging in, which is great. Still got a lot of participants on the call. There is a Q&A box, so if you want to ask some questions, we do have quite a few in there, which is great. If anyone else wants to add one, that would be fantastic. So I think I'm going to put Fergus actually on the spot for this first question. So the question here is, what would you say are the main initiatives that deliver on the goals of social value and the transition to net zero? So I'm not sure if you want to pick that up, Fergus, or if anyone else wants to chip in, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of initiatives, I mean, really, I think the main one is the one that's set out in the construction playbook, because what's that is really about in relation to net zero carbon and social value is mainstreaming the delivery of these in the way in which we deliver construction projects and programs. So it means asking firms in the supply chain, whether it's the designers, but it's also the material suppliers and the contractors, to actually not only think through how they design and execute the project in the sense of completing a built asset with digital systems incorporated, obviously, as that's the theme of today's discussion, but actually looking more widely about how that asset fits within the wider built environment. Is it built in the best location? Is it built in the most efficient way? Is it using the least possible amount of minerals? Have they considered the wider impact on the environment? Is it possible to use this building to achieve more than one objective? For example, can you incorporate energy generation and storage technologies into it? And similarly, on the social value side, is the way in which the project is being run going to offer training or the ability to upgrade the skills of individual workers who are contributing to the delivery of the project? Is it offering employment or career developed opportunities to disadvantaged groups or in less economically prosperous regions? And it's really about turning these things from the bolt-ons to projects that they've been in the past to things that we consider at the outset through our emphasis on output-based specifications, and through this approach of seeking to have longer term, more wide-ranging, more substantial contracts for the delivery of these projects and programs.
No, great, thanks, Fergus. I mean, certainly, I mean, it's something that I see all the time, people saying, you know, we've got all these topics that seemingly are disparate, but I think the great thing about digital technologies are they really are the binder that brings them all together, you know, so the information that we need in order to get to net zero is the same as information that we need to get to better modern methods of construction. So I think they are all aligned and they all do come together. Anyone else got a point on that, or should we go to the next question? Okay, well, let's go to the next one. So I think it's quite an interesting one, actually, because this is more about the kind of the human side of the digital, and it's really saying, should it not be a digital triplet, Mark? So really a question for you, is it not a digital triplet? Because obviously you were talking about the insights and the data for better decision making, but of course those decisions are made by humans. So I guess the good point here is that it's not just the digital twin itself, it's the people that are actually using that and undermining that. I don't know if you've got any comment on that.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I mean, I think, firstly, that the purpose that I tried to make quite a lot of, saying that digital twins really need to have purpose. I think ultimately the purpose is to benefit people and society. And let's just put in nature there as well.
Yeah.
So you know, people are kind of at the beginning of this and at the end of it, because that's kind of ultimately what the purpose is.
Yeah.
And then within digital twins, I mentioned that we anticipate many different digital twins of many different shapes and sizes, and an awful lot of them will have a human in the loop. I can imagine that there'll be some digital twins which will be closed loop digital twins, and that there won't be a human in the loop, where the human was in writing the code in the first place, and as kind of implicit decisions. Yeah. But for an awful lot of digital twins, there will be a human in the loop. And that human in the loop could be to do with the data collection, it could be to do with making sense of the data, it could be to do with kind of visualizing the data and making the decisions. It could be in implementing the intervention. You know, so all the way around the digital twin, you can see that there are places where humans can be. So it's definitely not that humans are excluded. You know, they keep on popping up everywhere. But like I say, it's all about benefiting humans that we would anticipate the reason for doing the digital twins. I think that there's one other point there that I'd like to make, which is to do with the key interfaces that we see. and I hope this is okay for Debbie, that I think that there are three key interfaces which we're looking at here. That there's one which is between physical and digital, which we've kind of talked about. You know, generally the interface there is some kind of data. There's the interface between digital and human, so the digital space and the mental space, which very often is to do with our visualization or our doing something back in the digital world. And so AR, VR, MR really has a lot to play in that space, the kind of the human digital. And then there's also the human physical. So I think in many ways that kind of language of the triplet kind of makes sense, because you've got those three domains where information or action is flowing. But I'm not sure that it makes sense to kind of definitively draw the human in that, because as I said before, the human pops up in so many places. So maybe what I should take from the question is we should make more of the humans, but definitely in the thinking, the humans are front and center.
Yeah, that's a good point. And of course, just to throw a can of worms into that, of course, longer term AI and machine learning and such like will take away some of that human kind of aspect as well, though.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? And I think it starts to get a little bit philosophical, but if we do think that digital twins can benefit us, I certainly do, then we need to make sure that they are genuinely for the public good. And that isn't a default setting. You know, we have to do put some effort into it to make sure that digital twins and connected digital twins are genuinely used for public good. That's its origin, that's where it comes from, but we have to make sure that happens. So I think it does need to be driven by values. We've talked about that. And if we are to apply AI in digital twins, which we already are, it's already happening, and Dale, you know this, I think we kind of need to be thinking about explainable AI. The AI needs to explain what it's doing. It's not just a black box that kind of pops up with stuff. So
sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I'll just be a tiny moment more. So I think it's a really important point, but we shouldn't be scared of AI. What we should do is make sure that it fits with our values. That's what I'd say.
Yeah,
which is actually picks up with where I was going to go. I think, Debbie, it is a really interesting point. And actually it plays to Mark yours pyramid, actually, doesn't it, of the decision making and where we want that decision making to happen. So where my mind was going is actually making a decision in itself of when we want the AI to be making a decision, and when actually ethically and from a value perspective we actually want humans to be involved. And that's then when we have to be looking at competencies and how we make information available, so that decision can be made in an unbiased, unmanipulated way. So it is a really intriguing one. I have to say I was quite interested by the triplet idea, but at the same time, a bit like the BIM stuff, is we don't want to overcomplicate concepts and get people confused. So it is knowing how to communicate that really clearly. Is that the people side of things is extremely important.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And that I didn't mention who the question was from. That was from Debbie Carlton. Next question is from Jeremy Galpin from Castaigne and Tideway. His question is any work being done to define the reference data model for social value? So I'm not sure if anyone wants to pick up the social value question.
I can pick that up. Yes, there's actually going to be a document published shortly, the National Procurement Policy Statement, which is going to set out what government means by social value. And really, I mean, in some ways, this harks back to the original Brundtland Commission definition of value. I mean, it's all about sustainability. It's looking at the economic aspects of this, the wider social aspects of this, and then certainly the environmental and net zero carbon aspects of this. But it's really about trying to make sure that what government does with every policy intervention, but in this context, particularly procurement, is aligned with the objective of improving economic opportunity, promoting communities, wider social value, upskilling, levelling up, etc. And then finally, net zero carbon, waste minimisation, biodiversity, so on the environmental side. So that should be published probably in the next couple of months or so, and there might be some supplementary guidance that's issued as well about how people should interpret that. But I think the basic document will give people a fair idea of what we're looking for.
Great, thank you very much, Fergus. Next question I'll take is one from Alan Muse from RICS. He's pointing out that, so it just moved on my screen. Alan's pointing out that the RICS, together with other professional bodies, have developed international collaborative data standards across land, property and construction. And his question is really, will it be possible to include these in the emerging data management frameworks?
Shall I have a go
Yeah.
at that? I mean,
Yeah.
the big answer is yes. You know, like yes, definitely. That's exactly what we want to do. So it's not a case of saying that there's an existing 100 standards, but we want to standardize a standard. So now let's have a number 101. The idea much more is about integration. But I think as we work on the foundation data model, what that then helps to do is make sense of connections between other data models at other levels. So there may be some work of kind of aligning and integrating, but the idea definitely is to be working with existing reference data wherever possible.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And I'm just going to go to some unique questions here. So Peter Asinder's asking, does the breadth and current work streams related to digital pull in adjacent industries such as the mining sector? So I guess that's that usual question. Are we broadening to other industries such as aerospace or automotive?
Yeah, happy to jump in there, Dale. So at the moment, the focus is very much on the built environment as a starting point. What I would say, though, is that within the advisory group, we do have a couple of people who have much broader reach, because we do want that cross-sector learning. But I think in the first instance, as we start to develop the starting point for the built environment, we're being a little inwardly focused now, but it's definitely the intent to learn from other industries and sectors as we go forward.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. And Pedro Renete Rusareno is asking, do we see the standardization of data across the industry as an absolute priority to achieve the goals for BIM? And what challenges will that bring? Sorry, what challenges do you see as the main ones on this data journey? I mean, Anne, do you want to?
Yeah, I guess so. So I think the building safety is a good example of that. So we are working proactively. For instance, bringing together approaches from Building Smart International, from the Housing Association's data standards, and OSCA. So looking at the UK BIM framework as the overall process framework, if you like, of identifying what information and how that needs to be delivered so it will be used through whole life, but then looking at the data standards as well. So what are the challenges? I think the interoperability piece is important. So enabling data to flow across the built environment, across different asset owners, builders, infrastructure types. And we are humans after all, and we like to be in our teams and our natives, and we like to therefore use our native language. So someone was picking up about GIS and BIM as a 3D model, and it's like, no, this is all about data and information. Technology must serve that. So I think it's that piece as well, which is really important.
Yeah.
But then I think the challenges, the standards are good in as much as they are providing that framework. The real challenge now is making this possible to implement from a pragmatic perspective, and that's what we're really trying to drive forward on right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. And then there's a question here on the socio-technical change program that you mentioned, Mark. Is there any information available on that? It's another one from Jeremy Galpin.
Not a lot that is in a kind of an immediately shareable form. We've done quite a bit of preparatory work, and it's kind of in the planning on PowerPoint slides at the moment, rather than in the output version. But if he'd like to get in contact, if he's got some kind of specific insight in this which can be shared, it would be really good to hear, because yeah, we're trying to formulate it at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mark. And Debbie's making another point about training. It obviously needs to work at both an individual level and a team level. I mean, is any of the training content being shaped in that way, or is it geared for different organisations, or how's that going to work? Maybe that's really for you, Anne, in terms of a lot of the work that you're doing just now.
So yeah, I've been talking with Debbie. It is a really important point, and one of the ones that you'll know that I'm concerned about from the way that we make decisions. And yes, I was making the reference to how we are actually able to talk across teams as well. But your point about competence and being able to define and identify level of competence digitally, I think is a point well made. There are the learning outcomes framework set by the Centre of Digital Built Britain. Building Smart has also been working on those. I know that you have been involved in that. And the British Standards Institution is also working on competency. So it does need to be not just at the individual and the organisational, it certainly does need to be at the team level as well. So the point is certainly taken.
Yeah, and another one from Debbie about the CDBB competence framework being a PDF document, and obviously that at some point in time that needs to be about ensuring that the machines are competent as well. I mean, any thoughts on that?
Maybe just to agree.
Yeah,
right.
It's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think agreement. Yeah, completely.
The whole industry needs to move forward on that. I mean, it's a case of what's the best way of sharing just now with the industry as it is now. You know, you're going to push down a route, but I think Debbie's exactly right.
Yeah, and then the last question again from Debbie is just looking at I guess competence frameworks around unstructured data and voice, video, and all these other aspects. So, any thoughts on that?
I'm not quite clear of the question. Sorry, Dale. Can you?
Yeah. It's if informing competence, not just skills, is key, then are competency management and analytics technologies on the roadmap? That's a more specific question.
I'm not sure if I've got it either, but I think there's a general thing here, which is that all of these digital competencies need to be on the roadmap, because I guess there's some identifiable competencies now. As we keep moving up our maturity curve, new ones will be formed. You know, we haven't got a complete picture now. This is a moving feast, and we're on a journey. So I think that there's an awful lot of additional competencies which need to be identified, that they're starting to make some kind of sense. And I think that you can see the picture that there will be some roles and functions that are kind of entirely digital, and jobs that never even existed 5 years ago that suddenly become quite recognizable now. So that's kind of like whole roles. But in addition to that, it's like every other role needs to have a digital slice through it. So it's not just leave it to the digital people. It's like everybody needs a slice of digital. And if I may say so, it's slightly cheeky, but you know, it is all the way through from the lecture room to the boardroom. You know, the upskilling is for all of us, and I think that there may need to be some upskilling in boardrooms too.
Yeah, I think that Debbie is also talking about how we actually digitally deliver competency frameworks so that they can be measured as well, rather than them being flat PDFs. And I think it is certainly desirable. It's finding the resource and the funding to do all of this, which I think is a challenge. But certainly, you know, those who can offer the input to help us move forward on that are very welcome.
Yeah, and in terms of the future, I mean, things are moving faster and faster. I mean, has the panel got any kind of thoughts on how we deal with standards in an environment where things are moving much faster than traditional standard creating consensus?
Well, I know for one thing, I would say that the ISO 19650. Okay, there's a couple of things what we need to focus on now. We don't need to develop any more standards. We need to just get them implemented.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be more focus on helping to make them accessible and turned into tools and apps so that people don't actually need to know that in the background there are standards which are governing them. From the point of view of where standards are required, I think we need to be a bit more hard-nosed to say, does that standard definitely need to be developed or not? And if it does, then British Standards Institution is now got a flex approach that they're rolling out. And both at the international and at the European level, there's investigations into how that it can be digitized and it can be quickened up. One of the things I would say is that with COVID, suddenly we're not traveling internationally and spending a quarter of our time traveling and recovering from jet lag. We're achieving an awful lot more meetings. So so twice a month at 8 till 10 in the morning and 8 to 10 at night, I'm convening meetings which are involving people from China, from Vietnam, from Chile, from Canada, from Australia, in a way we would never have done before. So I think actually this last year, the lesson has been we can achieve so much more virtually than we could in the past.
Yeah.
Provided we don't stick ourselves in meetings 24/7, of course.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, I'm the same. I've been in many countries this weekend, and I think that's been one of the big benefits is that we can connect all over the world really effectively in this new environment. That's all the formal questions that have been raised. So there's no more there. I mean, any last comments? I know we've got 12 minutes to go, but if we finish a few minutes early, I'm sure that will allow everyone to get away. And I'm sure there's probably a fair proportion of people here that have got 4 p.m. call anyway. So let's maybe see if we give everyone 5 minutes for a break before their next one. So any last thoughts, Kevin, from you? Or
that's just the only thing I wanted to raise based on one of Debbie's comments was just some of the thinking around data ethics. So as we start to think about the use of artificial intelligence, making sure that we consider the ethical reasons for doing it as part of those standards. But yeah, that was the only point I wanted to raise. But thank you, Dale, for the session.
No, thank you. And Mark?
Yeah, I think kind of a parting point from me would just be to emphasize again the connectivity between what we've said. I'm kind of hoping that it came across naturally anyway, but I think that underpinning everything we've said is this theme of better information management all the way through. That's kind of what this is about. But it's only when we recognize the value of information and potentially even put a value on it, start to treat it as a proper asset, that we really see that information is worth managing in the way that we've talked about. But yeah, my main kind of reflection is everything that we've said is connected, and I think that's the connecting theme.
Yeah, thanks. Anne?
Yeah, so someone's picked up that one of my slides just showed client and designer, and it wasn't the intent that it was just the benefits for those. We need to be realizing benefits right the way through whole life cycle. So, planning, strategy planning, design, construction, the maintenance, operations, users. I'm going to miss somebody in that, and it's a complex system of people who need to benefit. And that's what we're working on really hard, is to help people to lower the bar. So if in fact at the moment, from a building safety case, for instance, someone at the moment knows that he needs a risk register and a pre-construction strategy, but can't really identify he or she what the data is. Don't panic about that. Set that down as a first off. Think about what the decision is that it's informing, and then what is the actual information. But get help. There's people available through the organisations we've discussed today who are here to help and to lower the bar so that we can really make a success of this.
Great, thank you, Anne. And Fergus,
You're on mute.
last,
There you go.
yeah, any last takeaways, Fergus?
No, I think really just to emphasise the importance of the human dimension in all of this. I mean, the potential of data and the better use of information to transform the built environment is absolutely incredible. But what we have to understand is that means a transformation in the way in which we do things and the culture in which we operate as well. And to realise that the value that Anne was just talking about, it really will require an enormous number of people to improve their skills, their competency, their capability, but also get used to interacting with each other in different ways and through different mechanisms.
Yeah, great, thanks, Fergus. And I guess my final takeaway would be that hopefully everyone today has seen the sheer effort that is happening with government, the UK kind of BIM Alliance, the CDDB and the CLC and the CIC in order to pull all these disparate strands together. I think I'm personally really excited about this decade. I think we will see a paradigm shift in the way that we design and make buildings by the end of this decade, and I'm absolutely convinced that Fergus will get his productivity gains that he's looking for. So I think that will be fantastic. So thanks again to Kevin, Mark, and Fergus, and I hope you've all enjoyed the session today and learned something about how to embed digital technologies and a bit more about the construction playbook. So thank you very much for joining the call, and as we said, the recording will be available for anyone who hasn't managed to make it today. So thank you very much. And
Thank you.